Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Franchise Advisory Board, where we bring in experts from around the franchise community to share insights and trends and what's changing the landscape to help you stay prepared so you can build a brand that's memorable and that lasts. Today, I've got with me Alesia Visconti. If you don't know her, I am serious. You probably need to get out a little bit more. She is a joy, a lot of fun, tons of energy, and she is a major influencer in the franchise community. And I don't say that lightly. So, I want to tell you a little bit about why she's on the show today, because Alesia is awesome. She's the CEO of FranServe. She left a long career in career like helping. Tell me what kind of an industry? What would you call that? Career management, career
Yeah,
guidance? What would you?
career services. Yep, we help people at that time climb up the corporate ladder.
Thank you. I was reading and I was like, how do I put a label on that that's smooth? But that was better. Thank you. But 20 years of that, she came in as a FranServe broker, and 18 months later, she bought FranServe. And I think most people know the FranServe today that is the franchise you've owned because it's grown incredibly since you've been there. They were on the Inc. 5000 for 2 years in a row. They've got they're the largest franchise broker network in the world. These guys are, and Alicia herself, she's been a top 100 influencer in franchising for like 7 years in a row. She doesn't want me to share that, but I wanted to share it anyway, just so if you don't know her, you know, like this is why she's on the show today. But you got to know this, she just released a book. You can find it on Amazon. It's called The Pink Tsunami, The Rise of Women in Franchising. And it's a great topic because if you know the conversation I had with Sherry Fishman earlier this year, I mean, you're going to find these two are like right in alignment. There's this interesting dynamic in franchising. I want you to tell us a little bit more about it, Alicia, that makes it really conducive for women to thrive and be successful. So now, welcome to the show. Now, Alicia, tell us a little bit more about you. Tell us a little bit more about your book, and then let's wrap up with some thoughts about FranServe, and we'll jump into our topic today.
Absolutely. First, Dave, thanks so much for having me on your podcast. It's fantastic to be here, I have to say. I love doing these. I love helping people learn about franchising. And for me, franchising is the fifth space that I've been in. So I've been in a number of different industries, a number of different careers. This is my fifth, and I came into it the way most people come into it. We fall into it, right? Nobody at 10 years old says, "Hey, when I grow up, I'm going to be involved in franchising," right? Life just
Right.
happens. And for me, I came into it. I was a franchise consultant for FranServe for 18 months, and our founder at that time wanted to retire. Who knew? I did not know that when I was going into it. I got approached. I've always been CEOs, presidents for a number of years. So I got approached. I think it took me, I don't know, maybe 2 seconds to think about it and say yes. And I bought it. And then within a month, that was that was all wrapped up. And I owned FranServe. And at that time, it was a smaller boutique type of broker group. I mean, that's what they had built and that's what they were comfortable with. But I'm just never comfortable with that. so, so my team and I just went a little nuts, and we grew it out, and it's been a wonderful run. I have an amazing team.
Yeah, no, you do. You do well respected. I think everybody knows. Some of my dearest friends in the industry, they trust your consultants above all else. Not to say there aren't great groups out there, tons of great groups out there, but you guys certainly have a good reputation in the industry, and
I
you've worked hard for
appreciate
that.
that, Dave. Our first core value is integrity is everything. So my consultants, my brands, we live and breathe our core values, and we say them at conventions and before meetings, and it is definitely our mantra. So I appreciate that comment.
Yeah, but it's heartfelt. And it's kind of a perfect segue actually into our topic, right? Integrity. One of the things it is a hotbed of discussion, and it's kind of like under the surface a little bit is there are a lot of things changing in the franchising landscape specific to brokers and consultants or coaches, whatever you refer to them as, right? This group of people that help others facilitate the buying process of a franchise so they can be awarded a franchise by the franchise brand. Alicia, would you take a minute, just tell us like what's changing there? What's gotten everybody kind of ruffled around the broker community changes?
Well, I don't know that it's gotten everybody
Well,
ruffled, right?
maybe
I'm
people
a big
ruffled.
fan of it, right? You know that, but it is a hotbed, if you will, of discussion, right?
hmm
And I think honestly, one of the reasons why it is because so many people don't truly understand it. They hear either bits and pieces or they piece together with a combination of some fear and
Mhm.
unknown, and it's mushroomed into something that is like the scary monster under the bed, that doesn't really exist when you put the light on it. So for what's happening with the franchise sale, it's a third party sales um, change. So it's not just brokers, it's also FSOs, which is franchise sales organizations. It's anybody that's involved, if you will, in the
Mhm.
process of a franchise being awarded or sold. And up until now, and it's still not there. It's being worked on with with the IFA, International Franchise Association, and
Mhm.
NASA, which is a governing group that advises. It's still being worked on, so nothing is concrete, nothing's done. I think Sarah Davies, who's the general counsel for the IFA, and
Mhm.
I'm on her task force. I head up her task force. We're probably working on the third iteration of what these changes will be. So
Mhm.
what's happening is up until now, as you know, there was nothing. I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah.
anyone could be involved. Anyone could be a broker. Anyone could be a consultant, an advisor, a coach. You name it. You woke up today
Yeah.
and you decide that's what you want to be when you grow up, and
Mhm.
bam, you are.
Yeah.
So that, in theory, is fine, but in reality, it's not.
Right.
And so what's happened is to protect the consumer and the really good consultants and brokers, which are typically in most across, the broker groups. They're if they're in a broker group, they're being, watched and governed by their own applicable guidelines. But there's plenty that are just, rogue, who are just out there and one or two people, and they can do whatever they want and say whatever they want, and they're not really being watched. And that's not good for the public, and it's not good for, the good actors, the good
Mhm.
consultants and the good brokers. So I'm very for that because I think it'll wean out, all the ones who are, acting like the Wild West, right? Like
Yeah.
franchising, they can do whatever they want. So I'm very pro it, very pro.
Yeah, no, you and I, we had a conversation about this. I found interesting when I'd reached out to you and I had some a broker and who's a good friend of mine said, "Hey, we're concerned about a bunch of these things that are changing." So I was like, I need to get to the bottom of it. So I read the NASA drafts and tried to get educated on the back end. I appreciate you making time to have this conversation more publicly so people can hear thoughts and feelings about it. But the theme that kept coming up as we were talking about it was we're the only industry where we can have where we have somebody who's involved in brokering a deal that is generally speaking, as large as a house purchase, if not more, where there's no credentialing, there's no monitoring, there's nothing in place that protects the consumer from a bad actor. Now, I'm with you when you said earlier, like generally speaking, I've got hundreds of friends and clients that are brokers across almost every broker group there is. And I would say like you're right. I would say almost all of them, but not all, but most of them are really good actors. They're trying to help people get into the American dream. Like they have the same vision that you do, the same heart, but some of them are concerned about this, and I think partly because they don't know everything that's going into it. But I get why some of them are saying, Dave, like this isn't good for us to have new layers of red tape, to have new layers of regulation. And so I'm wondering, like, as we're seeing what's unfolding, and I want to get into more details, how would you approach that with someone that feels that way? Because as you mentioned, there's a lot of maybe ignorance about some of the things that are making this better for them, but how does this help the brokers in general?
One of the things that was or is a concern is that it will delay the process, that
Hmm.
it's going to take, longer for someone when you're speaking to someone, a potential investor, that now you have to have this broker disclosure document. Now they have to go through this, and it's going to delay everything. And that's definitely what came up at the beginning. And to be honest with you, when it was first being discussed, there was a lot of layers and a lot of things that were being discussed. And yes, all of that, if everything had been implemented, it would have been like, holy cow, right? How are we ever going to go through this? It's going to be like another FDD with 200 pages, But like everything, it slims down to being more realistic. So now what's being looked at is a very simple, 1 or 2 page document that does protect the consumer, ensuring that they don't have a felony, for example, right? I mean, you wouldn't want somebody working with you on an investment if they had a felony, right? So, disclosures like that, allowing the public to know that the broker, consultant, coach, advisor, whatever their title is being compensated by a brand when there's a placement. I don't really think that's a big secret. I come from a recruiting background as well, and that's how it works in headhunting and recruiting. The company pays the recruiter when they find talent. Well, it's kind of the same thing here. We find a new franchisee, we're an extension of the marketing or sales force, if you will, for the brand, and they compensate us. So I don't think that's like, oh my goodness, that's a big secret. We do have to eat, right, and pay our mortgages. So I think that fear around what was going to be involved was overriding. And now when you look at it, it's much more simple and basic. And we actually, I felt so strongly about it. It's not nearly as detailed because it didn't exist. But a number of years ago, when this was even first hinted about, I put together a broker disclosure document for our FranServe consultants, which are on our website, their website. They even put it in their signatures, full transparency. I think that's very important in doing business. So I don't think that the people who are concerned understand what's on the table right now in terms of this document. I think they're still referencing things from, a couple of years ago
Draft
they held
one.
on to. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and you're right, because draft one, and a lot of the California legislation was based upon kind of the first pass,
Crazy.
right? And that I think that's what, to be fair, I think that's what got a lot of these brokers really, really frustrated was
Yeah,
even to
919
brand.
was, insane and, again, like a 200-page kind of thing. And I think you had to give your blood type and the middle name of your firstborn and, everything under your shoe size. It was crazy, crazy, Dave.
No,
Yeah.
no, for yeah, and that's I think if we're being honest, like that's I think what's has scared the pants out of everybody. But you've now mentioned with the fact with IFA, with the task force that you're on, and there are several other people that are on that lead broker groups, right? And it's not just so it's not just Alesia loves it and IFA loves it. There are a lot of people who are you finding is getting behind the updated changes and feeling like this is really good for franchising? Who are some of the other folks that are loud voices there?
A lot of the brands. A lot of the brands are because what happens is franchising, as you know, is phenomenal, right? It's a fabulous, fabulous way for people to have, financial wealth and take care of it. But what you see in the news is usually like the tragedy that comes up, right? Every 3 years, some awful thing happens. And that's what people think of sometimes of franchising. The public thinks of it as big business and they're going to harm all their employees and all this kind of stuff and their franchisees are being taken advantage. You hear all the negatives, and I think a lot of the brands welcome seeing the transparency. People who are on board with it are very excited about the transparency because that takes away the fear.
Hmm.
When you know what you're dealing with, when you know who the person is, when you know their background and how they're being compensated, and there's no secrets. And secrets create suspicion and hostility. And I think in this day and age, and younger generations coming up, and all of that secret stuff, and those, that's all gone, man. That's so old school. So I think if you can't be transparent, if you can't talk openly about how the broker community works, then you're just feeding that fear. So a lot of the brands are excited. We're all still not quite sure how it will take place because we know that it has to be kind of like one form that will fit across all states. You're not
Hmm.
going to be able to do 50 for 50 different states, So
No.
we're still trying to figure out the logistics, if you will, on how to make it easy and when it comes to play? Is it going to be when you first have a meaningful conversation? Is it going to
Mhm.
be before the FDD? Like, when will that come into play? When will it be? So you're still trying to figure that out a little bit with all the parties to be.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into that a little bit. Like what's actually I mean, we talked about disclosure function and how that's been slimmed down from, disclosing everything, your personal finances, your social security, your home address, right. So we've that's been whittled down from what was in the California legislation to something super reasonable. What are the core? You mentioned they're disclosing that they're being compensated by a franchise brand. The brokers that I know, almost all of them, regardless of the group they're in, most of them talk about that openly anyway, right? So that shouldn't, I agree, it shouldn't be a secret, but frankly, there's no motive to not share that. But so that's one thing. I think everyone can get behind that. That they don't have a felony, probably viable, right? If you've got a felony and you're selling franchises, like I'm sorry, right? But you can't be a felon and manage securities. You can't be
Right.
a felon and
Right.
be a real
Right.
estate
And
broker,
to be
right?
honest, I mean, like the broker groups usually, like we do, when we're vetting someone. But
Yeah.
again, there's people who are not in broker groups, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why these things are applicable.
Yeah. So what are the other highlights? So can't be a felon. Gotta disclose that you're actually going to get compensated for the work. What are the other key tenets that are now part of this whittled down disclosure process?
Yeah, and it's things that really will fall, in my opinion, more on the broker groups to handle. For example, roughly how many different brands do you represent?
Mhm.
Right? Because let's just say you're a small, tiny independent and you work with 10 brands.
Yeah.
Well, that's really not fair to your candidates because you're only limiting, right, their ability to learn about 10 different brands, right? So roughly about the size of the brand, the number of brands. And again, probably falling on the broker groups, roughly the percentages. Are you doing more in food? Are you doing more in pets? Are you doing more of the averages so that someone can understand when they're looking at something like that, the public, that yes, they have a diverse inventory, if you will, and they represent across the board. So this is a good thing for me to do. It's like they don't just specialize in one thing and I'm going to get slammed into that no
Hmm.
matter what I do.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very good reassuring thing to the public.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of work, right? But if a
Yes,
brand,
it's a little work.
the home office, UI, FPG, Fran, whoever, FBA, like you guys all put a packet together and say, here's our disclosure information. I mean, is the broker going to need to spend hours and work with an attorney to build their own disclosures? That
No, and I think what will happen is that each one will, like, just like, I mean, you see that New York State, for example, has broker registration one time, right? You register once in the state of New York. Washington State, you register and then renew. It's paper filing, right? Once you're established, it's ongoing paper filing, and I think that's what will happen here, right? The template, if you will, the bullet, if you will, is going to be, in my opinion, fall on the broker and the FSO, again, to put the specifics of percentages, or the number of brands they work with, or things of that nature, the generalities of it. And then the individual broker will say how long they've been in the franchise space and what their career was for the last two, 3, 5 years, something like that, right? And that's kind of what, in my opinion, it'll come down to. It's
okay.
not going to be how much earnings did you make, to the dollar and cents last year, and what, which is what I think a lot of people were afraid of. But I would never support that, right? You don't have to do that in any industry, right? You wouldn't have to do that in franchising. So, but I do think that, again, with a little bit of self regulation here and honest transparency, I think that goes such a long way to the public and to showing that we're not this crazy secretive group. That no, we're just honest people helping people to own businesses, and we make a very good living at it. You know,
Mhm.
that's fabulous in my opinion.
Yeah. I've got to ask a question. So one of the last things you brought up there was the length of time they have in the franchising industry. I think about all of the new brokers that are coming on board, right? That the answer for them is if they disclose would be a year, 6 months. Uh, I wonder, like, do you feel like that might be something that would slow down the onboarding of the recruitment of brokers into the groups? Do you think that would be a deterrent if people are like, I got to disclose that I don't have any experience now? I'm not saying that's unfair, by the way. I think it's reasonable if you know, hey, you're a broker and you're an expert. If I talk to a real estate agent or I go to the dentist or I get my hair cut, you know what I ask the stylist? I'm like, so how long have you been cutting hair? It's mostly to, like, just to get a conversation started. But if she says, oh, I just got out of beauty school, I'll be like, uh-oh. Like I'm gonna pay real close attention to what you're doing to my head today. Just to, I don't, I got a conference next week. So, so I think it's reasonable. And yet, do you feel like that will be a deterrent for the recruitment of brokers and onboarding of brokers?
No, because they're, I mean, especially the ones with the broker group, right? Because you have the power of, like look at FranServe, right? You have all the guidance of senior and training and all of that, right? And I think the reality is, you can see it when you go to someone's LinkedIn, also, right? I mean, you know, there, there there's nothing wrong with being new and experience. You gain your experience over time. It's like, company corporate, you say, I only want to hire someone with experience, but they won't give somebody a chance, right?
Mm,
I think the difference, I mean, we have brand new consultants every month that we add. We turn down more than we add, but we do put on new consultants every month. And most of the time, they have phenomenal business background. I
mm,
mean, they've been on Wall Street and they've been on, I mean, they have great business background and now they're coming over to franchising. So their background actually lends themselves sometimes, even better. We don't have to untrain them for things that they learn that doesn't serve them. But I
mm.
don't think that will harm them at all. I think that, as I said, you can see it in a heartbeat on LinkedIn but they always people in broker groups always have mentors and people around them. And I think that I think that comes into play. I think
Yeah,
that comes into play.
yeah, I
I think
agree.
if you're by yourself, you're an independent and you've been doing this for 2 months and you have no guideline, yeah, maybe I don't want you talking to me about what I should be doing with $500,000 to invest in a business, And that's
Mm.
why I think it weeds out, the bad actors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. One of the things that changed, I don't know how recently, but fairly recently, it changed from the first draft that I saw. Initially, the FSOs were kind of exonerated from all the
Yes.
disclosures. And I know, to be real frank, that ticked off a lot of people because between us girls, while we're talking about this in a public setting, right? I mean, I would say of all the fiascos that have happened in the recent history, they're not all brokers. Some of them
Yeah.
are caused
There.
by an individual and I'm not going to say it's caused by an FSO, but it's usually an individual bad actor that's employed by an FSO that creates chaos. I know several brands that have dealt with this personally in the last couple of
Correct.
years, and they're with reputable FSOs that I know well, but they just had hired the wrong guy, and there weren't enough controls, and that created a problem, right? So no one on this podcast is saying FSOs are evil and brokers are evil. That's not the point. But the point is, how did we get that so the regulatory shifts now incorporated the FSOs, who are essentially in a very similar position to a candidate as a broker, ultimately.
Yeah, well, that was definitely the case, and you still hear the the regulations being called, the broker disclosure,
Mhm.
and it's not. It's third party, right? It's third party. It's no longer called the broker fill in whatever they were calling it at the time, but it's third party because you do have FSOs involved in it, and I've spoken to a number of them as well, right? When in being involved, I've spoken to other broker networks. I've spoken to other FSOs because we all are involved in it. In fact, 2 years ago, I started the Broker Coalition, right, just so that we had a forum that we could all speak about and express our feelings about it and concerns and excitement about it. So it has morphed, it has grown to encompass many more platforms than just broker groups. I agree with you 100%, and I think that again is a positive thing because you have new FSOs appearing, constantly. Some of them have been around a long time, very reputable. But same thing. I mean, tomorrow I can be an FSO and I can represent three brands, and that's all I'm pushing, morning, noon, and night. And so again, I think that's good for the public to know what's happening in that
Mhm.
world.
Yeah, I completely agree. What you said, so third party, so FSOs, brokers, are there any other bodies or individuals or groups that have been kind of roped into that regulatory broadening, I guess?
Well, there was talk about lead sources, but that's kind of been pushed off the table because they're different. They're not really involved. So you still see some, areas being looked at to see what's involved with it and what's not, right? But for the most part, the third party does consist of FSOs, brokers, and again, that also encompasses the individual, the not with the group,
Mhm.
independence, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term.
Yeah, love that. Love that. So tell me where do we see the benefit? Like, so now we've talked about the regulations, what's happened, what's morphed. Let's envision this world of franchise consulting 2, 3, 4 years down the road where this is rolled out. How is this both protecting the franchising business model, but also creating, I think, additional benefit and value for the brokers that are going to stick with it?
Well, two things, in my opinion. One, I do think that it becomes a more trusting environment. And, if you're trusting, you're more likely to engage,
Hmm.
right? So I think it will benefit people coming into franchise ownership, which benefits the brokers and the brands. I think because you remove these layers of doubt, unknown, secrecy? Are they like, are they, the typical quote unquote you salesman, car salesman, right? I still once in a while go to an event and it's like brokers, the unnecessary or the necessary evil. And I'm like, can we get away from that for heaven's sakes? I mean, my goodness, not everybody, who sells is this, horrific person for heaven's sake. So I think a lot of that will change the attitudes towards people who are involved. We don't sell. That was one of the big complaints on brokers even getting involved in this. We don't sell. We don't collect money. We don't administer the contracts. We don't get involved. We don't do any of that. That's why we're considered consultants in FranServe. We don't even broker a deal the way things happen in real business, right? How the term broker came up. So that was one of the pushbacks. We don't sell. Why do we have to have all of these disclosures? We're not selling. FSOs tend to do more selling, right?
Yeah.
We don't. But I think it's good for everyone involved because, again, the public doesn't always understand that nuance.
Hmm.
And so they feel that we're involved in that. So why not make it feel comfortable for them? And in my opinion, anything that helps people come into franchising or to feel more comfortable about it or to learn that it is small businesses, it's not big business. Hallelujah. Let's have more of that.
Mhm. Yeah, I find it interesting. Like I've been in the industry for 7 years now, I guess, a little over 7 years. So I'm still a baby compared to you and others that have been here for a lot longer.
I'm still the new kid on the block, believe me.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, there are people I know that I've been doing this for 40 years. I'm like, dude,
Yes.
like I was still picking my nose when you got into this industry. So they but put that aside, I've always found the term broker kind of interesting. A few things in this industry I've always found like, why are we calling it that? That's not how it works anywhere else. Or that term broker literally means like you're sitting at the deal table, you're working with the attorneys. Like that's what in my mind, that's what I thought, that's what brokering means. If you're going to sell a business, like you're a business broker. You're in the middle of everything coordinating the whole deal, where franchising the term broker, I like consultant a little more, to be honest, but it doesn't matter. Broker's fine, but I find it's a very watered down, stripped out version of what brokering really is. So I'm with you. Like the fact that, I mean, it is important though, because you're the one initiating the hunt. You're the one that's introducing to the brands. You're the one that's helping to pre-qualify the candidates. So it does make sense that there's regulation around that in some regard, right? And the
Yeah,
key,
I
go ahead.
agreed. I just think the word, I don't know how, before my time, what can I tell you? I don't know how the word broker can, I would have pushed back a million times on that. Because what you said, it's true for everyone. It just conjures up a specific image and it's not accurate. I'm not saying it's good or bad.
Mhm.
It's just not accurate. We're not
Yeah,
business brokers. There's a big, big difference legally on that. So,
yeah,
but here we are. So we do call ourselves consultants, though we have from day one.
yeah. Well, so let's talk about the benefit to the industry a little bit, Alicia, because you and I both know that every now and then some news outlet picks up something, and frankly, they're just trying to get click ads, right? But they'll try to exacerbate an issue in franchising and make it seem bigger than it is, and condemn an industry based upon the actions of a small few people. Or there have been scandals where people have created brands that weren't legit, sold a bunch of units, and moved offshore with a bunch of money. That doesn't happen very often, but and they get chased. But like, how does this whole idea of improving disclosures help us reduce the risk of these types of things happening in the industry? I don't think we can eliminate them, frankly, because a bad actor, they're not dumb. So bad actors will still figure out a way to work around the new regulatory stuff. But how does it help reduce the frequency or the intensity or the scope of some of these things that can happen that can really damage people and the reputation of the industry?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think if you're a con artist, you're going to find the workaround, right? And so, but at least we make it harder, right? At least you have to jump through a lot more hoops. So maybe something will be, caught before that, right? If you look at the FDD, for example, right? Again, um, that helps for people to prepare. An item 19, an item 7, people do see things. You do pause a moment and have to look at something. I mean, you look at why you can't, sign something 3 days, right? You got to have your 14-day when you get the signature for your FDD. But um, I think it's like that. I think it's very good for someone to say, okay, let's step back if I'm looking at something and learn about a tiny bit about this person who's advising me to look at these 4 brands, right? What's involved? Do they have ownership in them? Yes or no, right? If they don't have ownership in them, they're not as uh, they don't
Bias?
have duality, right? They don't have a conflict of interest. Maybe they have ownership in them, and that would be disclosed. See, so I think you're never going to eliminate, you know, um, like you said, somebody who wants to, be, a nasty person. They were always going to exist, but we can do a pretty good share in shaking them down and helping to make them jump through enough hoops that they slip up somewhere or they see something or just make it harder so they move on to something else.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Well, and tell me, what do you anticipate this is going to start taking effect? Because that's the big question everyone's trying to answer. Get out your crystal ball with me for a minute because we don't know. Like California made this ridiculously complex system that they can't really enforce, and they keep punting down the road with this legislation. I suspect that'll be a pattern for a while. But when do you suspect that we'll start seeing some of these changes take place so people have to take action on them?
Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it, with everything that goes on in the world, right?
Yeah.
So it was going to be July of 26, and that's still what we're looking at some of the things happening. But as you said, things get delayed and things get changed, and there's also expense in incorporating all of this for the state. Somebody has to admin, somebody has to, it's why California not always in the best financial state, financial situation. Doesn't always implement things that, right? Because you still have to pay and, for employees and people to do all that. So it is interesting. It's also one of the reasons why I'm never one to put my head in the sand, right? And like, oh, I won't pay attention to it until it just comes to be, which I've heard plenty of times with people in brokers and FSOs. I'm not going to pay attention until it comes down. Well, I'm very proactive, but I also don't, let's just say, freak out because I know things in life happen. So I'm proactive. I always look forward. I make sure my ducks are in a row, but I don't overreact, right? You never let your intelligence get blindsided by your emotions, right?
Mhm.
And especially in business.
Yeah. Well, but also there's something to it. It's like the Hunt for Red October. Have you seen that movie? Like,
Yes,
yeah, the
read the
brilliant
book.
move where Sean Connery turns the submarine into the torpedo before it can arm. Like, I feel like that's how I envision this is really, if you take a step back from it all, like California, God bless them, right? They need that. They are $20 billion in debt every year. every year. And like, so they come up with these crazy A regulations. And I'm like, how are you possibly going to administer that? You can't, you've been rerouting all your money into embezzled projects out to build railroads to nowhere for Newsom's friends. So like how are they going to administer it? But it's not in California. Somebody's going to be able to figure it out. So I think sometime in the next couple of years, at least my take, and I'm not an expert, but it feels like turning into the torpedo to get ahead of it and also steer the direction of this thing. Uh,
100%, Dave.
yeah, feels like
Right?
it's the
Isn't
way to
it
move.
better to have the IFA and the community that it serves, right? I mean, the people who are going to be impacted rather than a room full of lawyers who know nothing about franchising dictating how we're going to have to communicate on transparency and what's involved. You have to have people who've got, franchising under their fingernails, so to speak, because if you have people who don't know, well, Lord knows what they're going to come up with. They don't know. So having the IFA involved, having a task force, people like myself, other FSOs, and involved in this, at least we have a seat at the table. That's very important when you're talking about regulations and government um, just putting their fingers on things.
Right. Well, especially where here's the crazy part is a lot of these things they get incubated in California. And California is like the least friendly to business state in this union.
You mean the country of California,
Yeah,
right? It's a separate country. You know
I
that,
call it
right?
the communist nation or the People's Republic of California. That's what I call it. But legitimately, it's terrible for business. And
Yeah.
and I know dozens and dozens of brands that won't even do business in
Yeah,
California
me
because
too.
they don't want to find that they can't do business there overnight because some attorney sneezed, wrote a draft, and some legislator punched it through because no one understands business in that state.
Correct.
Right? And there are people
Especially
that do.
franchising,
Oh my
right?
heavens,
People,
yeah.
they don't understand business, but they really don't understand franchising, right?
Right. Yeah. And so if we don't get involved now, right, frankly, if we don't get involved 2, 3 years ago when you guys started forming these committees, like then the shape of that, somebody else is going to politicize this idea, and politicians are lazy, right? They're like, oh, I can get some legislation and borrow it from California and then deploy it in Washington State and California and Oregon. Like that's how politicians work. They take the draft of that and they're like, find and replace California with Oregon and then tweak a few more things to align with our codes. Like, so that's why it's so important, though, right? Is because this regulation that's being drafted and approved in one state, somebody's going to borrow it and then
Oh yeah.
repurpose it, and then it's going to start spreading across the country, and we've got to get way ahead of that before we got to strip the garbage out of it so it's manageable before that starts happening.
And that's why I do think it's important not to put the head in the sand and to support it. Just being negative about it, like I don't want it or I don't believe in it. How does that move the needle forward? You have to get involved and lend a voice that makes sense, right? To help shape it. That's the best thing
Mhm.
people can do. Help shape it.
Right, because it was coming. It
Yeah.
wasn't like IFA went to California and said, "Hey guys, I got an idea." No, no, it was California started creating some legislation around this, and IFA is like, whoa, 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 oh, here, let us help. At
Yeah,
least
let us
that's
put this together and then we can tweak it. And then it's kind of like, when you get someone to buy in, right? And they're participating and it's a group thing. Has a whole different hostility level than it's us versus them, right? It's
yeah.
not good.
I agree. I agree. Alicia, this has been awesome. Like, I appreciate you being willing to dive into I think a slightly uncomfortable topic for some people,
Yeah.
but I just felt like after we talked, it's like, my knowledge was 2 years old on the topic. Even after I was reading what was in the forums and in the public sentiment, that was a year and a half old and has already been changed and morphed a bunch. So I think that this is important. Thank you for making time to go through this with us.
Listen, I'm so thrilled that you put a flashlight on this, right? Or spotlight on it because most people don't want to talk about it. And I never have any, I never have any fear on any topic, right? I think the more you expose things, the better it is for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. Transparency, right? Openness, and frankly, open dialogue before something gets codified is really, really critical. So thanks for your effort in that. You've been great.
My pleasure. Thanks, Dave.